Okay, so I'm really delighted to have everyone here with us today. I am just thrilled. We've had over 85 people sign up for the webinar. It's obviously a really pertinent topic. Start with a quick intro as to who we are. I'm Deborah Sobel. I'm the founder and partner of Verity London. We're a purpose-driven strategic communications agency. Purposeful businesses grow 3 times faster than their competitors, and they're more likely to be profitable. And we work with corporates and we work with not-for-profits. Really, these are brands who are ready to stand up, lean in, and create thriving futures for their organization and society. And we do this through our end-to-end process on purpose. So you can see some of our products here. And we help clients uncover, develop, and communicate their social purpose. And the way we define social purpose is the way organizations make a positive impact on society through activities which are integrated and aligned with the core business of the company and which contribute to long-term growth. So really thrilled that we have got a fantastic panel. Still waiting for Matt, but we do have a fantastic panel of speakers lined up with us today. You can also see in our panel Jamie, who's our account manager, who's going to be helping field some questions later. So we have Alex Scales, who's the director at the Centre for Charity Effectiveness at Cass Business School. We have Katie Legg, who is the director of strategy and partnerships at Mental Health UK. And hopefully when Matt comes on board, she'll be speaking alongside him about the partnership with Lloyds Banking Group. And Matt is the manager of volunteering and charity partnerships at Lloyds Banking Group. We've got Jason Suckley, who's the CEO of Make-A-Wish UK. And Sarah Hansen, who's the Director of Charitable Programs, EMEA at Walt Disney Company. And I think this topic, purpose and partnerships, it's never been more crucial now, as every organisation faces its own set of challenges brought on by the crisis. On the one hand, we've got the charity sector facing a £10.1 billion funding shortfall over the next 6 months as a result of the pandemic. And on the other, there's the growing realization from business and increasing expectations from consumers and employees, all fast-tracked by the pandemic, that they have a responsibility to make a positive impact on society. So a purpose with profit, a purpose beyond profit. So I'm hoping over the next hour, we'll be looking at opportunities for really how business and charities can leverage purpose, how you can be innovative, how you can move things away from the more traditional corporate giving model. And we'll be hearing how our panelists have managed to develop mutually beneficial strategic win-win partnerships, and really how this is helping build sustainable growth on both sides. We would love to encourage questions from all attendees. And we are going to have time, hopefully at the end of this hour, to put those questions to our panelists. There is the chat function, so while we can't hear you at the moment or see you attendees, you can write in the chat. And please, as we go through this hour, do type your questions in, and Jamie will be collating them, and then we'll be able to ask them towards the end of the hour. And we'll try and get through as many as we can. And if you can say which organisation you're from, that will be really helpful too. So to begin, I'm delighted to welcome our first speaker, Alex Scales. And Alex, let me hand over to you, and very much talking about the fact that we are moving beyond this traditional CSR model, aren't we?
Yes, hello, thank you, Deborah, and good morning. I'm delighted to be joining everyone this morning in this conversation. So as an opener for the next 5 minutes, I'm going to briefly touch on what I think it means when we talk about moving beyond a traditional CSR. And it's something, as Deborah says, that we're hearing more and more talked about. And for me, this is very much about moving from the tactical to the strategic contribution, and for both partners. And for that to happen, there really has to be an unrelenting focus on the purpose. That meta goal, or what sometimes I more colloquially call the glue that holds these conversations and partnership activities together. And it was interesting, just a few years ago in a survey, 91% of businesses cited brand or corporate reputation as the leading motivator for engaging in partnerships with non-profits. And equally, it was 92% of non-profits saying that the key driver for them was targeting resource generation, income generation through partnership working. And I would argue that whilst this still plays a very valuable part at the appropriate time, it is mainly tactical, transactional and traditional, and many successful partnerships have now moved beyond this, away from that sort of high number of small and short-term initiatives to those initiatives that will enable sustainable impact, or put another way, that's that longer term core value creation for both sides that will contribute to the strategic goals of both partners. And I think it's about those projects that can make the biggest difference socially and environmentally, and that typically neither partner could achieve on their own. And I think, as Deborah mentioned, it's also, it means at times like this, like today, when we're working in such a challenging operating environment across all sectors, that this mutual strategic focus is at its most important. Socially responsible projects are arguably needed more than ever during a crisis, yet we know from evidence from the last recession that corporates are more likely to reduce their commitment at these times, and to those CSR projects that are seen as non-core and are much more difficult to justify. Equally, it can be tempting and even a necessity for non-profits at these times of challenge to drift away from their strategic mission to short-term projects. And there's often a danger that there begins to be a blurring of boundaries between what's in the best interest of the organisation at those times through those activities and what's in the best interest of current and future beneficiaries or service users. So what do I think corporates and non-profits need to think about when entering into a partnership to ensure this absolute focus on purpose? And pretty high up my list has to be measurement. This needs to be thought about in many forms, and just, you know, touching on 3 examples very briefly this morning. But I think the charities and the non-profits need to think through really carefully, not only they need to think through 2 things. Firstly, what they can offer the corporate or business, and then actually, what is it actually worth? And I don't necessarily mean financially, although, I mean, that is useful if you can put a direct or an indirect financial monetary amount on it, or use some form of financial proxy. But how do you articulate that wealth? And it very much builds on the measurement work that many non-profits are now doing very well, some less so, some not at all, but there's definitely a shift towards that, in the right direction for measurement. And equally, I think it needs to be thought about that it's not just about generating big numbers for marketing teams on either side to push out, but actual consideration of how to measure that strategic, social or environmental change. It's the change that we're trying to measure that's being created. And inevitably that's going to involve both statistics, numbers, but equally stories to really bring that depth and colour and narrative to the change that's being created. And finally, I think there needs to be, just in the examples this morning, there needs to be balanced measurement between the partners, and it needs to be proportionate. And what might be easy to measure in the eyes of a business or a corporate might be completely out of reach in terms of resource or expertise that's contained within a non-profit. I think if we're talking about moving beyond traditional CSR, perhaps we need to think more about moving away from partnership to that multi-party collective impact. And there's more and more talk at the moment around, you know, the issues that we are all dealing with as a society are so great that they're calling for systemic change. And that inevitably means many parties coming together cross-sector, each playing their own unique role to create that value. And to create something that can't be created just by 1 or 2 people partners working together. And I think that's going to obviously call for businesses, corporates, not calling to be the sole partner visible in terms of a working relationship, and equally from the non-profit side. You know, we need to move forward perhaps from a non-profit or charity wanting to be the sole owner of a relationship, and perhaps not wanting to have a competitor to have a look in. And I think the last point I'd like to make about one that needs to be thought about is the exit. And I think I've left the last point. It's a simple one, but in reality, it's so difficult to put it into practice. And we hear from clients and our students in terms of the difficult conversations. But I think right at the outset, those difficult questions need to be asked. How will either side exit from a project when things are not going to plan? So it's that need to have the difficult conversation at a very early stage, and to agree the boundaries and exit strategies. So that's an absolute whistle tour from me, very high level, but with a few thoughts to kick us off. And now I'm really looking forward to hearing from the fellow panelists to hear the frontline experience of how they've created such valuable partnerships. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alex. And I can see Matt has now joined us too, as Jamie. So Jamie has given you his login, which is fabulous. Good to see you. So I will, if that's all right, hand over now to, let me introduce you to them properly. So we do now have Matt under the guise of Jamie Galansky. But Matt, thank you for joining us. I know that was a bit tricky getting on this morning. Matt's the manager of volunteering and charity partnerships at Lloyds Banking Group, along with Katie Legg, who's the director of strategy and partnerships, Mental Health UK. So I will now hand over to both of you.
Super. Thank you, Deborah, and good morning to everybody. I think what I was just going to do today is just kick off by talking about a little bit about our 5-year partnership with Lloyds Banking Group, and to try and sum up, if at all possible, with the time that allows some of the phenomenal achievements that we've had over that period of time. And I would say that our partnership with Lloyds Banking Group has possibly been one of the most phenomenal partnerships that any charity could have with a corporate organisation, because of our intrinsic sort of synergies. Our relationship started back in 2016 with a conversation around the intrinsic links and challenges of ill mental health and money problems. I think we estimate, certainly before COVID-19, that approximately 4 million people a year are affected by both mental health and money problems, and each of those play sort of a root causal link to the other. It's never a case of it being just one way round. And so we began that conversation with Lloyds through the shortlisting process for their Charity of the Year partnership. And what was really phenomenal for us, and I think has been one of the key successes of our partnership, is not only has that intrinsic link been recognised by the senior leadership and by the executive team, but through the vote process that the Lloyds Banking Group facilitate for its Charity of the Year partnership, we overwhelmingly came out as the charity that colleagues wanted to engage with, the charities that colleagues wanted to fundraise for. But it wasn't just about Mental Health UK. Our proposal to the colleagues was about mental health and money, and colleagues, despite what you might naturally assume might be something that some individuals might want to shy away from, was something that the individuals recognised that it was something that they could contribute for. And those first 2 years of our partnership, I have to say, were absolutely non-stop and phenomenal. And I wouldn't have, looking back, I wouldn't have had it any other way. It was our ambition to raise £2 million a year through our partnership. And we were successful in doing so, and setting up certainly the world's first and the UK's only mental health and money advice service. And this is something that was done from scratch and phenomenally done in partnership with the group and with some real subject matter experts, so that we could ensure that not only did we land our expertise in mental health and money correctly for our clients, our service users, but also that we were careful to ensure that we built our service in a way that it matched our capacity, and equally that it had the full knowledge and understanding of a financial institution such as the size of Lloyds Banking Group, that we could set it up in a way that allows as much as humanly possible for sustainability at the end, which Alex has already alluded to being a priority for any partnership of this size. And to date, that service has been absolutely fantastic in terms of what it's delivered. We've supported over 3,000 people through our advice line, and we estimate that we have achieved somewhere between 7.5 to £8 million worth of financial gain for our clients. And that's through a combination of enabling access to the welfare benefit system, which they might have struggled with previously, and also supporting them in resolving debt issues that they perhaps shouldn't have found themselves getting into in the first instance. I think if our partnership had finished there, we would have been happy and we would have walked away. But you know, we were asked at the beginning to set our big, outrageous goals by Lloyds, and you know, I think what was sort of truly outstanding is even within those first 2 years, not only did we achieve that initial £4 million worth of fundraising, but actually the fundraising, I think, reached 3.6 million by the end of the first year. So we were already into sort of planning as to how further we could utilise that mutual understanding and skills of the group to further our reach into other areas and other key factors that affect people with poor mental health. And we did that through a sort of a series of investments into other areas of our activity. But I think what complemented that so perfectly were a number of other key things, and that was around the volunteering that the group managed to provide us, not just with the project that they fundraised for, but holistically across the organisation. Increasing our digital capability and our capacity, I think, was something that was absolutely phenomenal to have come through from the group. And in addition, there was a developing sort of story and narrative around the understanding that mental health is something that we all have, and ill mental health is something that affects 1 in 4 of us every year. And when you take that into context of the number of people who work at the group, it probably represents 15 to 18,000 colleagues and millions of customers. So we managed to extend that partnership out, not just to be about the benefit that we were providing to the community, but we've also provided training to Lloyds colleagues. And I think by the end of 2021, we'll have trained 2,500 workplace champions for mental health, and we're now beginning to explore how we can work more collaboratively to improve the mental health through the engagement with Lloyds customers as well. Fortunately, as we were, you know, sort of going through that journey, enough people, both from sort of a groundswell bottom up, and those who are sitting in sort of a decision-making position, to recognise that the momentum in the partnership was very, very strong, and we were definitely in a position where more people than not felt that there was an awful lot more the partnership could achieve, which resulted in us extending the partnership initially by a further year, and then now a further 2 years. So we're running right through to 2021. And I think it was really important for us, and probably something that Matt will talk about in a little bit, that the key successes to sustaining a partnership for that long and mitigating the risks of fundraising fatigue is continuing to engage the colleagues in the decision making. And actually, we took a collective decision to continue to work strategically on mental health and money advice, which is now co-funded by Lloyds Banking Group and the Department of Health and Social Care, but actually to move on to other issues that were equally as challenging for the UK population. And we actually settled on working on the resilience of young people aged between 14 and 18, which you know, was probably a decision made well ahead of its time when we consider some of the challenges that young people are facing, having missed their last year of school or college as they head into university as a result of COVID-19. So it's been a truly successful partnership. I think if I were to try and list out everything else that we've achieved, I could probably take the full hour, so I won't. But I look forward to talking a little bit more about it in a bit.
Thank you, Katie. I think it's me now to talk about this from a Lloyds perspective. And I've been asked to talk about you know, how this partnership aligns to core business. So at Lloyds Banking Group, when we look at charity partnerships, we do so in alignment with our core purpose, with our aims. We start that journey looking at emerging themes and emerging themes of need, and looking at how the partnership can fit alongside our aim of helping Britain prosper. Helping Britain prosper is a set of very public measures that we have within the group around how we believe that we can help people and businesses all across the UK. And this fits perfectly within that. So every decision that we make, and we make in society and with charity, very much takes that into account. So again, in looking at that partnership, looking at those emerging themes, you know, we look then at the charities that could fit within those themes and do so at a UK-wide level. I think with mental health as a theme, we as an organisation recognise that mental health is a bigger issue than just charity. It's not just a case of us giving money and trying to achieve something. That there is much more to this, and it's a fundamental issue for us that we believe in. An issue that, as Katie's already alluded to, impacts our customers, impacts the colleagues that we've got, and we've got nearly 70,000 people who work for the group, and impacts the millions of customers that we've got. And as Katie said, 1 in 4 people there. So a massive issue that we feel responsible for committing to support. Again, this just goes beyond anything that we've ever done before. And Katie again has already said that we've extended that partnership twice, and that really goes against everything that we've ever done in the past. Partnerships that we've had used to be a year, and then it was 2 years max. To do something for 5 years, I think is really extraordinary for Lloyds Banking Group, and I think probably a lot of organisations who've changed the charity partnership after a couple of years. But for us, this was a theme that we felt that we were just getting into. It was a theme that we felt there was so much more to do, and I think again, Katie used the word overwhelming support from our colleagues when the colleague vote happened on charity partnership. And yeah, it was overwhelming at the start, but then when we then went through a second colleague vote to say we want to extend the partnership, then again overwhelmingly colleagues voted in support of supporting young people and young people's mental health through the program that we've developed called Bloom. So the level of support and level of understanding within the group is massively important. But again, just going back to that term of being about who we are, there's so much more that we've done that's gone beyond fundraising. We've done a lot of work on mental health advocates, on how we support colleagues, on how we support customers, using the expertise that mental health have got, and really looking at not just one single project and helping young people and helping young people's resilience, but how we can be a better organisation for our staff and how we can be a better organisation for our customers as well. So the partnership really goes on embedding that culture within the group and supporting the people who we have responsibility for. Again, as Katie said, I think from a colleague point of view, and my background even pre-charity partnership is volunteering, and I've been doing volunteering at the group for a long time. And people want to not just give money, people want to help, people want to get involved. And I think, again, a real key part of this partnership for me is people go in, yeah, of course I'm going to fundraise, of course I'm going to do a bake sale, of course I'm going to take on a challenge, but what more can I do? What more can I do to help? And there's a real desire from people. And again, I think a key part of this for us is what is the ask of people that's not just money, because I think, at times that can be a given, but it needs to be so much more. I think just for me, a couple of lessons learned for me. One is around leadership, and leadership is massively important. And we've been really lucky that our chief executive has been really open about his own life living with mental health and the challenges that he's had, which I think is incredibly refreshing for everybody involved in our organisation, that he's been so honest and committed on that topic. And it sort of resonated within the group about how genuine this is, that, like I said, this is not just a case of raising money. This is massively important for us. And then I think the other thing that for me is just clarity on where we're trying to get to. It's not about grand numbers. It's not about, we've raised over 12 million, which is great, but what is the difference that we're trying to make? Where are we trying to get to? What's that journey? Where are we now, and where are we trying to get to? And making sure that message is really clear for everyone who's wanting to take part, I think, is probably one of the biggest call outs for me. I think that's probably time up for me. Katie, was there anything that you wanted to add, or are we back to Deborah?
I mean, I'm happy to pass back to Deborah, but I think just one or two of my sort of further reflections on what you were saying there around kind of lessons learned is, you know, when you take on a partnership of this scale, and particularly for a charity that, you know, at our sort of time was, well, we were registering as a charity whilst forming our relationship with Lloyds Banking Group. That's how young we were. I think it's very easy to be in a position where you want to please your partner all of the time, and it's only through sort of the openness, the honesty, and the transparency of the sort of the limitations, whether that's capability, capacity, or performance of a particular program, when you get to a position where you can do that with absolute trust, that you really form a bond that's going to be there for a very, very long time. And, you know, if we consider what's happening with COVID-19 at the moment, we were due to be delivering a programme to tens of thousands of young people in schools this year. And obviously the reality of that is it's just not been possible to do. And I think where our relationship with Matt and Lloyds Banking Group has been incredibly strong is around not just sort of assuming that colleagues will sort of know and understand that there's an issue and that we've had to step away from that, but to make that sort of specifically really kind of quite clear to colleagues, and also to talk about the positives that are still happening with their fundraising and their support sort of during that period of time. So we've actually been able to take some of our activity online, but equally as a charity, it has given us 5 minutes to sort of pause and to make sure that our capability and capacity is ready for what will be an even greater need as we head into the September term than we've seen so far as a result of the pandemic. So definitely it's one about sort of, you know, true relationship management, true honesty, and for that not just to be between yourself and your account manager, to ensure that that flows both up and down within the organisation. And when it's 70,000 individuals that you're trying to work with and influence, you just can't ever consider that as a job done.
Thank you, both of you. I think I'm very excited by your partnership, because I think what you've clearly explained is, in a very innovative way and in a very kind of collaborative way, you've totally taken your partnership beyond anything transactional, which might be the more traditional, you know, model of doing things, to be completely, you know, mutually supportive. And I think, Katie, you know, you were describing the real value add that I think between the two of you, you've obviously managed to set clear objectives, which is crucial, in order that you've got your aims. I love that Lloyds have challenged you as a young charity to kind of come up with these BHAGs, you know, your big, hairy, ambitious goals. And that's obviously how you've managed to power forward. So thank you very much. We will now move on to speak to Jason and to Sarah. So Jason is the CEO of Make-A-Wish UK, and Sarah is the Director of Charity Programmes, EMEA at Walt Disney Company. So if I can hand over to both of you now. Jason?
Thanks, Deborah. Yeah, morning everyone. Hope you're doing okay. I just before we start, I just thought it'd be worth just very briefly reflecting on some of the stuff that we've already heard. So I was interested in what Alex was saying around the importance of measuring purpose, and that's a really tough thing to do, I think, with something like purpose. You've got to really define it properly first, and never mind find how it's shared across the partnership. How it's possible to get multiple parties involved, and sometimes, you know, we know as a sector that we can be over competitive and fundraising gets in the way of that sometimes, but that can absolutely add to a shared sense of purpose. And then what Katie was saying, it's an obvious thing to say in many ways, but relationships underpin all this, don't they? You know, you can probably have the most academically solid partnership in the world, but if you're not honest with each other and you know, build trust, then none of this is going to happen, because you're going to have to learn together through this process. You won't have all the answers on day one. Some of those things will come through what Sarah and I are going to say anyway. So this is a partnership, the Disney and Make-A-Wish partnership, which we're actually celebrating our 40th anniversary of this partnership. It was started in the US 40 years ago. It's grown to over 38 countries now across the world, and in that time, Disney Wishes have consistently been across the world the most popular choice of children with critical illnesses. So, you know, what we do is we we seek to change the lives of children with critical illnesses through the granting of their wishes, and children make that choice, and they've consistently chosen Disney over this time. So around 140,000 children over the last 40 years have been granted a Disney wish through this partnership, and that itself is an achievement. But it was, this was something that for many years was based upon some really solid and some really good, if you like, philanthropic principles, which really was about matching supply with demand and doing the right thing for the child. Disney brought the magic, and we brought the wish journey expertise to make sure that was a great experience for the child. It's really though only been in more recent years, and in particular where we've sought to, if you like, jointly understand what are the effects. First of all, what are the effects of a child's critical illness on their emotional well-being and on the resilience of the family around them? And as we've unpacked that together, we've found that those effects are quite profound, beyond the obvious in terms of the condition of the child. This can have, medium to long-term effects on the emotional resilience of the child and the family as a whole. And it's only really been in recent years where we've delved into this. We've understood, first of all, what those, what the implications are for a child and the family, and therefore, counter to that, what can the positive impact be from wishes? This is, we've suffered actually as a charity have been, very rarely do you say, I work for Make-A-Wish, and people say, well, that's a really nasty place to work. Everybody likes, intuitively what we do, but it becomes a sort of isn't it a bit of a nice thing to do? Isn't it a bit of a luxury? And actually, when you unpack this, you find that it's a lot more solid than that. There's a lot more to it than just a happy day out. So a couple of things that we've done. Disney sponsored some wish impact research that was carried out by Aston University, which identified some of these, positive impacts that I've mentioned. Increased happiness, resilience and coping. Quite surprising finding that a family's belief about what they could achieve together broadened as a result of the wish. So often families will be doing stuff which they didn't believe they could otherwise have done, and then that broadens their horizons beyond the wish as to what they can achieve together, and to generally therefore live fuller lives. I would just also make a very quick mention of a piece of work that that we did in collaboration with other strategic partners of Disney, which is around developing a theory of change. So there are, we're talking about here maybe 4 partners where we're all actually facing in the same direction in terms of seeking to increase the emotional resilience of children, but doing it in very, very different ways. So together we did a piece of work that said, what's our starting point, what are our services, and what are the outcomes, and that's given us a really much clearer sense of what is the role of emotional resilience for a child with this condition. And back to Alex's points, really, so we've managed to establish a shared purpose, but also a means of measuring that, and we've brought in other parties to help us to do that in a way which has been beneficial to everyone. And again, I think there's some alignment with what Katie and Matt were saying in terms of, once you've got that shared purpose, which you've got that real clear, goal at the top of the organisation, COVID then comes along, and it becomes a question of saying, well, we know where we want to get to, but we're going to have to do things completely differently in order to get there. And that makes the whole, therefore, in other words, a purpose-led partnership is a more sustainable one through challenging times such as this. So we've there's a natural marriage really between what Disney do and what we do, and it would have been easy for us to just continued in that transactional manner. But now we've got this shared understanding of impact and how that supports. I mean, really, if you wanted a sort of a purpose statement, it probably is moments that matter, and we've discovered how much they do matter to children and families through this time. Once you've got that, you can, as I say, you can innovate together. So some of the stuff that we're doing at the moment is that we've got 2,000 children waiting for a wish, which is, I mean, it's heartbreaking. These children have been looking forward to you know, their life-changing experience, and there's a indefinite amount of time for when exactly that's going to take place. So our focus has become, well, how do we therefore provide hope and confidence and all the positive aspects of a wish to those children whilst they're waiting, and you know, our friends at Disney have been helping us with various ways of you know, achieving that. For instance, all of the children who are waiting for Disney wishes have been given free subscription to Disney Plus, as an example. But there's lots more to come there in terms of how we are intending to innovate together. None of us have got all the answers, have we? You know, and I think that having a partnership where we talked about trust, where we're able to be honest with each other about what we do and don't know, you know, is a really important ingredient.
Thanks, Jason. I think, you know, I think the key things to take away there is kind of the positivity and opportunity, looking at the opportunities that this awful pandemic actually is providing. And also the fact that you've emphasized that it is about the strategic planning, you know, right from the beginning. It is about that value exploration together right from the beginning, having those mutually shared goals, but actually adding real weight behind all of it. So you 100% need that strap line, and then having that real activity and weight, etc., that hangs off of all of that. And Jason, I'll just pick up as well, because when we spoke, you also said that actually the partnerships helped you as a charity drive commercial strategy, which is interesting as well.
Yeah, we don't exist to grant wishes. We exist to change lives. It's easy to forget that, and this process has really helped us towards that.
Brilliant. So I'm going to hand back over to Alex for any sort of other thoughts, and then we've got some questions coming in on the chat, and I have some other questions as well, which we can put to all of you. Alex?
Brilliant, thank you. Wow, I mean, such wonderful case studies, and I'm very glad that I did put measurement very high up on the list of things to think about, because I think that's come through so clearly, but not just in a sort of statistical numerical form, but both the partnerships have really brought through the importance of it, but in terms of how it is more than purely the counting and the measuring. I think for me, that in continuous engagement, I mean, we have a relatively new but still a good long-term partnership, you know, which is going to extend to 5 years, which is fantastic. And then alongside that the 40-year relationship, and I think both really underscore that. You know, the value of investing time right at the beginning of the relationship to explore what is of interest from each side, and to take time to build the trust. And I think both partnerships, you know, it underscored again the need not for it just to be a transactional relationship, perhaps between the social purpose manager or director on one side and a representative from the charity from the other side, but you know, that continuous engagement and communication across both organizations to get that buy-in that's going to work. I love the way that Lloyds Bank have extended, you know, building on that relationship over such a short period of time, but you know, adding additional pieces to the relationship in terms of work that is benefiting both sides right now, looking in terms of how one can work with the clients and the much wider stakeholder groups, and again building that from the continual conversations. I think the leadership is really important. So often we hear about the power imbalances and perhaps the hesitancy on the side of the non-profit when entering into conversation, because you know, there's an acknowledgement that perhaps there are significant cultural differences and behavioural differences. And I think on occasion, non-profits may have a tendency to put themselves on the back foot inadvertently, thinking that a very established, wealthy corporate, you know, perhaps is holding the power in terms of saying how the relationship is going to unfold. So I think that looking at the shared values. I think the term was, I'm just looking at my notes here, pulling up the common currency, that common platform, that shared value, really helps avoid that and move beyond what we perhaps think of as traditional CSR in terms of the benevolent, very valuable, but benevolent relationship. Sorry, I can't get my words out this morning. To that shared value and more balanced, equal relationship. And I think just I was delighted to hear how, you know, the theory of change has benefited Disney as well. It's a bit of a buzzword, it's a bit Marmite, but, you know, call it what you will. It is really charting, you know, that journey from what you're doing to the sort of outputs that you are delivering, but ultimately what is that creating, and how do you aggregate up all those little bits of change in the area that you want to have an impact on, to create that wider impact. So thank you everyone, that was fascinating.
Great, thank you, Alex. Let's go to a couple of questions and see how many we can get in the last 10 minutes. So we'll start with a question from Sarah Woods around how you get yourself into a position to even start the conversation with a potential partner, how to reach out, and who to when you might not have an existing contact there. So does anyone have any tips around how you'd even begin reaching out to somebody? Who wants to take that?
I think I'd say be as targeted as possible. You know, I think sometimes it's tempting to be network led. Who do we know? And therefore we should be talking to them. I also, you've got to be reasonably clear about, if you're going to go into this credibly, what is your purpose? How could that be? You know, how could that be generally shared with a partner? Because I think once you've got that clear, you should be able to give yourself a really targeted list of partners, rather than going with a more traditional "who do I trust these?" type of an approach.
I'll happily give a view as well, and I'll give two views, because the first view from a Lloyd's point of view, as I said in my introduction, what we tend to do is look at the landscape, we look at emerging themes, we look at, this is very much driven by us and our own research and work, and speaking to experts around what we feel is coming down the line and what those problems are, and then working with the charities who we think might be a fit to come up with concepts that we can then propose to colleagues and say, which one do you want to do? And so it's very much that way, rather than somebody approaching us and saying, you know, we've got an idea. I do, however, in my second view on this, I do know a lot of companies and speak to a lot of companies through various forums that I'm part of, and committees that I've sat on over the years. And I think one of the things that's probably touching upon things that we've already talked about, and it's around purpose. Don't get lost in the thought of the money and thinking about going, let's just get a corporate on side and therefore all our worries are gone. I think it needs to be a genuine approach of what is the mission of that company, what are they trying to do, what are they trying to achieve, and how can we as a charity work with them as well? Because I'm seeing more and more that partnerships are purpose, mission, rather than just writing a check. And it needs to be more around what you as a charity can offer to the company, and how that mix would work. I would say, don't anyone lose sight of the fact that partnerships, companies can have more than one partnership, and it doesn't just, you know, there's a fundraising partnership, charity of the year type concept, but there are so many more partnerships to do so many more things. You know, from sustainability at Lloyd's, we partner with the Woodland Trust. You know, there's partnerships that exist that's not just charity of the year. So please, again, all approaches don't need to be, can we be a charity of the year as well?
That's a brilliant point, and actually leads us on to the question, or links to a question from David Berland, who's asked this question about wider strategic partnerships. So have you, or would you consider involving other organisations from your respective sectors in the future?
I think that's definitely it's definitely true for what we do and what we would need to continue to do to be successful in our relationship with Lloyds Banking Group. So I think if we think about it both from the sort of the service provision side of things, and then sort of secondly how Lloyds Banking Group bring in other organisations from their side. We work with National Debtline, Citizens Advice Cymru and Step Change in order to ensure that we seek the right beneficiaries for the activity that we do. If we were to just go and try and seek the right beneficiaries ourselves, I think we would be sort of extremely limited in our ability to get to a wide-ranging audience. Equally, the group have brought into play a number of other organisations within the financial sector who contribute into the sort of the long-term strategic plan for mental health and money advice, most of which sort of orientate around UK Finance, which is a collective of the UK's biggest banks, looking to sort of make systemic change in terms of the ways of banking practice. Oh, there was something I was going to add to that and I've now forgotten. No, let me leave it there. If I remember it, I'll come back to it in just a second. Oh, actually, I do know. Sorry, beg your pardon. The one recommendation that I would make on top of that, though, is, you know, when you do, I think for any organisation that's looking to sort of associate itself with the primary charity of the year with a corporate organisation, needs to recognise and understand, particularly when you're trying to communicate to 70,000 colleagues in the instance that we are with Lloyds Banking Group, the importance of clear communications. And it is extremely difficult to communicate in a way that drives action, whether that's fundraising, volunteering or something else, if you convolute your message by trying to explain the complexities and the strategic activity that you're doing. And in that, Mental Health UK already brings together 4 charities, and we learned the hard way about this at the very beginning of our partnership by trying to ensure that we were giving credit to our 4 founding charities who are our delivery arm for mental health and money advice and Bloom through to colleagues at Lloyds Banking Group. And in doing so, we were losing sort of traction, and we were losing the purpose of the partnership, which is to sort of generate all of that positive income and volunteering for the 4. So we really did have to simplify the messaging down. So it's about recognising, yes, you can bring those partnerships together, but you do need to have really simple, coherent marketing and messaging to your audiences to drive change to be successful.
Brilliant. Thank you very, very much. I'm going to draw it to a close. We've got a couple more questions, but what we will do is we're writing a blog afterwards, which we'll put out to everyone, and we'll try and include lots of practical takeouts from this as well, because I think this conversation has been really insightful. So I want to thank each one of our panelists. Thank you so much for your time this morning, and all the attendees for having signed up. Thank you very much, and I hope all your purposeful partnerships go from strength to strength.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Yeah.
Thanks, Deborah.
All the best.